Welcome to Party of Two, previously known as Party of One, but after a life-changing revelation, I believe a recalibrating of some sorts is to be done. You're here for one reason or another. My guess is you've seen something you like. You felt a resonance on some level. Perhaps you've stumbled across this page by accident. Or someone has brought us together. The time has come, and you're ready. For what, you may ask? To party? Just the two of us? Not quite. Party of One, now two, is here to get you through what I like to call the journey back to the truth, the you underneath, before the lies you were told about reality and who you should be. The you before you evolved into something that was perhaps needed at that time, but is outdated and has bound you to the past, keeping you from his peace. The you before the meandering path of life began to take a toll. The you before someone else assigned you an avatar, a specific role for you to play in this game we call life. But first, like most adventures, before we move forward, we must go back. A little patience is needed, but I promise, it will all make sense in the end, my love. You and I both know that the greatest story always does. When I was young, I thought that where I was the only place I'd ever be. At that time I decided that what I'm feeling now would be near impossible. Like it was written, somewhere in the stars, that I was to be alone, exiled from whatever real life was, its beauty, and everyone in it. I would have never believed in the idea that my past was the only way to get to my future. Perhaps not one I planned, but one that once I got, I wouldn't change for the world. For the most part. You see, now I look back and see it as more of a creation story. A prequel, if you will, as opposed to what felt like an unfortunate series of events. Sadly, despite my dreams being dashed and divided, there were no stars that I wished on at that time. What was left did not sparkle, even after it was broken.
I don't belong in the world. That's what it is. Something separates me from other people.
Back then, it was like I'd been pulled away from the center, into the peripherals, where I stayed the observer. But after a while, I collapsed under the pressure of seclusion and plunged into a hole that knew no bounds, where gravity kept me on what felt like an infinite time loop. Every moment fell into one, and suddenly, I was everywhere, and nowhere, all at once. What once seemed like chaos, my chaos, now feels like something divine. A surreptitious unraveling, a route planned out, long before I had arrived. A genesis. What would you call it? Serendipity? Or fate? Whatever it is, I believe there's a path we're all destined to walk on, no matter what belief we have on the power of the decisions we make. When I was young, if I'd had the energy, I would have laughed. Laughed at the idea that there would no longer be a time where I prayed for a night to be my last. To have the cold arms of death sweep me into what would be an embrace of an eternity. I would have scorned at the idea that simply laying there, basking in the love of his beloved son, would bring me more peace than any silence, or that the warmth from his word could envelope me in an embrace stronger than any lover. That simply walking through the open fields, gazing up into the big blue sky, would supersede any desire to hold on to Molly and her cheap, fabricated high. But we all pay for the things that we wish for, that are absent in our lives in some way. You see, there was a time in mine where my light was stolen, my sun eclipsed by something dark and foreign. I watched as my skies faded from one colour to another, pink, orange, lilac, and then black. With no more light to swallow, the darkness turned inward, and with the warmth of my sun being a thing of the past, it was only natural for the life inside of me to disappear too. My new friend feasting on flowers that could no longer bloom, spreading like a passive but permeating poison. Everything I touched, saw, smelt, tasted and heard became void of whatever essence it once had. And I was trapped by this thing whose presence quite frankly was uninvited. Something that turns your heart into its new home. And even though it resides within you, you are its prisoner, subjugated to the inevitable effects of its bleak, convoluted nature. And after a while, you no longer have it.
Everywhere.
It has you.
They're everywhere. They're not going to let me go. Everywhere I turn.
When I was young,
There's something
the possibility of it leaving was never a thought that had crossed my mind.
blocking my escape.
It and I were one, now and forever. I thought it had robbed me of the possibility to become anything else, robbed me of the ability to function in and amongst society like everyone else, robbed me from my friends and my family, leaving behind nothing but a burden. Or at least that's what it felt like.
Like you were happy in life. Let's see.
When I was young, I swung indefinitely between a rock and a hard place. The rock being death and the hard place being life. Like most people my age at that time, I swam through the depths of my despair, wondering if it would ever come to an end. Or perhaps this is just what things would be like now. Always on the outside, looking in. I wanted things to be different, but I knew that the ending of my pain meant the eternal suffering of my own kin. But I was bored. I was bored of the grey and I yearned for something new. And I wondered, if everything was black, then maybe I'd no longer feel so blue.
Trying to prevent me from living. He's trying to take
But despite what I would have described back then as an agonizing sorrow, I always felt like that would be cheating. It wasn't I that brought myself into this world. So do I really have the right to choose to leave it? Besides, what if there was something more? What if there was anything, even remotely deserving of my attention, that existed between the moments where I toyed with the idea of death on the rock? Or questioned life while stuck in the hard place? Something that would eradicate my nihilistic beliefs about existing. Something intrinsically embedded, out there in the ether, that only if I noticed it, everything would fall into place. Things would matter and feel good. Life would no longer be the enemy that paralyzed me with fear. And the battle I fought every day, melancholia and the guilt that followed, would finally disappear. So, as my name decreed, I began my journey. You may know me as Nevidamarie, but Harina is who I'm known to by my friends and family. In some cultures it means seeker of wisdom. Others, most beautiful, and in the book where my parents found it, chosen. I'll let you decide which one rings true to you. And so I voyaged. I voyaged away from the seemingly outdated foundation of Christianity, That wasn't God to me. It didn't make any sense. My pride and curiosity took me down a path where I felt I could understand what the truth really meant. But you see, that was my first mistake. Thinking that the truth had anything to do with my feelings. I'll spare you the details, for the sake of your soul and time. But first, I'd like to share a little glimpse into the previous beliefs of mine.
But I'm not just generally happy. If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable.
From the age of 15 to 24, I was a believer in the power of crystals, star signs, spirit guides, ancient wisdom, and manifesting.
I don't know.
The belief I could have anything I wanted simply because I wanted it, and I'd suffered enough, so I deserved it. I also believed in reincarnation and extraterrestrial life, galactic federation, the Pleiades, Arcturians. Dare I mention the Draconians? Towards the end of that time in my life, I believed I was in fact one of them. Do these sound familiar to you? A reincarnated soul, an ancient nomad who'd gathered knowledge through many different lives across the universe. Have these species answered your question? I was to be a vessel in which I could channel my desire to bestow beauty and peace to others through my supposedly renowned words of wisdom. Have you been told that you're one of them? I was to do this by sharing my own journey. Well, I can assure you. A journey I embarked on by myself over the years. You are not. Restoring that desire for life and learning to appreciate all the beautiful things in it. You are made in the image of something much greater, powerful. But I've come to realize none of those things are rooted in truth. Truly benevolent. I fell victim to believing it because they answered my questions. It's not your identity. Why do I feel the way I do? Why is the world the way it is? It is not mine. Believing I was here to suffer in order to teach others how to heal themselves gave reason to the shadow that followed me all the days of my life. I thought I had suffered, died, and brought myself back to life with the power of self-love in the name of my divine life purpose, carefully picked out before this current incarnation here on earth to fulfill my karmic, universal destiny. However, despite being a believer of these false teachings, despite my continuous practicing of ancient modalities that were supposed to heal me of my emotional pain, despite the wisdom I found in esoteric mysteries and knowledge I had gained and thus became superior to everyone around me, despite my so-called ability to create my dream reality and decode the meaning of my life with the position of the stars, after almost a decade, I was still lost. I grew weaker, colder, and more distant by the hour. Not to mention hopeless, lonely, and confused. My pride, fueled by delusion, formed a wedge between myself and my family, who were kind and patient enough to love me through it all. 10 years down the path of my spiritual awakening, I was at my lowest point, and I didn't even realize. Emotionally, mentally, financially, socially, even physically. At 24 years old, I woke up every day close to tears because of the pain I was in. All in the name of what, exactly? Deception. That's what. As much as I thought it was something I truly understood and resonated with on a soul level, after almost a decade under its spell, I found myself more confused than ever. The more I learned, the less I knew, but the sheer delusion of it all prevented me from realizing it. But my story doesn't end there. In fact, it's just getting started. Let me tell you how my old self and I finally departed. September of 2022, after complete exhaustion, I decided to give it all a break and tried to be normal. I had lost interest in most things I used to enjoy and was waiting. For what, I don't know, but he did. A month later, I was at work and connected with a passenger. Her name was Iona. few minutes into our conversation, I heard a voice suggest to me to ask her about Stonehenge. Now, for a bit of context, I was thinking of visiting Stonehenge at that time. I'd also been communicating with spirits who I thought were there to guide me, so I was used to taking orders, so to speak. This time, though, the voice was different. It was still and gentle and clearer than ever. And I also felt it in my heart. The others, they used to form like thoughts in my head, but I knew they didn't belong to me. Anyway, I asked her, and it turns out that's where she grew up. We spoke about many things considering the short time we spent together. At the end of our conversation, she offered to pray for me, and I said sure. If I'm honest, I'm not sure why, but I did. She asked what I would like prayer for, and I thought very quickly about all the things I wanted, and in the end, the thing I wanted most was my health. I was experiencing a lot of pain in my back at that time, and I was in a lot of pain that day too. So she came over, closed her eyes, and placed her hand on my back, and prayed in the name of Jesus for my back to be healed, for God to reveal himself to me, and to share with me my purpose in life. And on that day, in the middle of the airport, I discovered the power in our Father's name. Because before she even left, my back pain disappeared. All I could feel was a sensation that felt like water, gently falling down my back. I remember coming home and telling my dad, "Dad, I think there's real power in praying in the name of Jesus." Anyway, I didn't think about it much after a few days, until 3 weeks later when I decided to message the clairvoyant I had multiple psychic readings with in the past and ask her how she was doing, and let her know I just bought my first tarot deck. If you're unfamiliar with tarot, it's a way to communicate with what I know now to be not so familiar spirits. The next day she responded with a warning that I should be careful and how she had thrown all her practices out, no longer believes in any of it, and has given her life to Jesus Christ. Now, I don't know about you, but when someone who's practiced something for nearly 20 years and made it their entire career tells you to be careful because you don't have the discernment you think you do, I listened. I invited her to share her testimony, and for an entire weekend I watched many others online talk about their experience on their so-called spiritual journey, and how at the end, Jesus was there to save them from the bondage of it all. After a few days, many tears, a ton of anxiety, and spiritual attacks during sleep paralysis, I decided to open my Bible. And on the first page, printed at the bottom, was the name Iona, the name of the woman who'd prayed for me a month before. This Bible was given to me by my father when I was a child. He received it from his grandmother. In the Bible that belonged to my great-grandmother was the name of the woman who prayed for me almost 30 years later, maybe even longer. It was that night I gave my life to Jesus Christ, because the only one who could have orchestrated it all is God. Since then, I found the way, the truth, and the life I spent the entirety of my existence, as short as it may be, looking for. I finally have peace. Peace I couldn't get from meditating or simply visualizing an alternative reality. I have experienced a love too great to describe with human words. I don't know what your beliefs are, how you've ended up listening to my story today, if any of that made sense to you, or if you're just here because someone told you to listen. But I want to tell you that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is nothing like the world says he is. And his love for you surpasses all of which this world will ever have to offer. The meaning we all search for in relationships, career, money, vacations, music, spirituality, even art, will never be found. Because He created you out of love for Him. The reason you and I are here today is similar to the reason a mother desires to have children. It is out of love she brought you into life, so she can enjoy you and you may enjoy life and grow in all the ways she thinks are best for you. It is the same for our Heavenly Father. You were created with love, for love. That's it. That is where your meaning is found. In Him. It's strange. You see, I was under the impression, as we all are, that everything you need to feel good is within you, somewhere. And all that other stuff doesn't matter. I thought, like most people, I could only understand what that meant once I'd earned my notoriety and Riviera. It's almost like before you can accept that those things are inherently worthless and bring no real joy, you have to feel the emptiness that it brings you first. And whilst that is partly true, something is missing. God. It is in Him we find everything, and without Him, we are nothing. We were made to dwell in His presence forever. That is why we yearn for something beyond our reality and fear the end of our days on earth. So, if curiosity has been sparked within you today, whether it's the size of a watermelon or a mustard seed, know that if you call out to the Creator of the life you live, He will answer. He is there, and He wants all your pain, all your love, and all your heart's true desires. So in return, He can give you peace, rest, and eternal life. The lies of this world and the author behind it thought that he had me. But Yeshua said, "Do not be afraid, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine." And do not believe for 1 second that if you are hearing these words today, that He has not called you too. I look forward to hearing your story and how He reveals His love for you as well. May the Lord be with you, always, until the very end of the age.